Hello, everyone. We are about to start this panel, Fundraising, Making the Dough Rise. We're going to speak a little bit about fundraising, firms, what motivates folks to work on this aspect of politics, fundraising, explain a little bit the importance of the job itself, and just chat about good practices, back practices, and everything fundraising related. My name is Roberto Nava. I work for Solidarity Strategies, but I also help gain power with events like this. And yeah, I'm going to give everyone the opportunity to present themselves, to talk a little bit about their background, about their job, uh, and about their and how they got to work in fundraising. So I want to start with Becca.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, so wonderful to be with all of y'all this morning. My name is Becca Slutzky, and I have been working on campaigns for quite some time now. I got started on Hillary Clinton's first presidential campaign in 2007 in Iowa. Ended up doing about 7 states with her across the country. I initially came up through field. Also did some student organizing in there for fun. Ended up going back home to my home state of Virginia, where I was the regional field director for the coordinated in 2008 for Obama, Mark Warner, and Tom Perriello for Congress, which was an absolute blast. And can we go back to 2008? What a great year. And then from there, kind of actually moved into political. Probably worth kind of throwing out there. I've worn a lot of different hats in this industry, which is something I highly recommend for anyone starting out. It's really great to experience all the different aspects of the campaign and really kind of understand on a deeper level where everything fits in and how they all work together. But yeah, so after working kind of in the political department on two different governors races, I then went back to field and was the field director for a governor's race in 10. Then I honestly got out of politics for a little bit, moved to the West Coast, went to law school, worked in sports for a bit, and then kind of jumped back in as a campaign manager doing criminal justice reform on a statewide ballot initiative in California. And then from there, I went back to my home state of Virginia, and I was the executive director of the Virginia Democratic Party for a few years. So I was there basically 15 through 17. And then after that, I moved to Nashville and started my own political consulting firm. So I now mainly do email fundraising at this point, which is why I make sense on this panel. Had a journey to get to fundraising, but have been in kind of the real rationale and kind of what got us started at that point was the concept that better written, fewer emails would raise you more money in the long run. I had kind of been told time and time again, it's a numbers game, get everything out the door. And I was like, you know what, let's try something else. So the beauty of Nashville is I also like the idea of bringing kind of different people into the mix. So I actually ended up hiring my brother, a country songwriter, to be my main copywriter. And that has been an amazing journey that we've been on now together since, wow, I can't believe I'm saying this, 2018. So we're in year 6, which is great. Moved to a couple states. So I'm now recently relocated to Los Angeles, but we work across the country. In terms of kind of who we work with, more so statewide campaigns, but definitely congressional and up. We do state parties, we've done PACs, we've kind of done a little bit of everything. And again, just really, really excited to be here, and I'll pass the baton to whoever's next. Am I picking who's next, or are you? Sorry.
Let's go with Chad.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. My name is Chad Hunter, and I'm a Senior Director for Blue Wave Political Partners. which is a fundraising, compliance, and digital firm, kind of fully integrated firm on the kind of financial side of political partners. Just a little bit about my background. I think Becca and I got kind of started in politics at the same time, which was an interesting time for people our age because we graduated kind of right in the middle of the Great Recession. And I remember, in college, I had volunteered for Obama. So I was on the other side of that primary and kind of managed a state rep campaign of another student who was running for the legislature when I was in college, and had kind of gotten connected to somebody who's running for governor in my home state, and got a job basically finals week my senior year. And I remember thinking like, oh, I'm the only person I'm graduating with right now who was able to get a job. There might be something to this, being like a little bit of a recession-proof industry, but I got on kind of day one on the governor's campaign as a very junior fundraising person, which is also kind of the benefit of fundraising as you're kind of first hired, last fired. It's kind of the most job security in the campaign world as well, because everybody, no matter what else they're doing, needs to fundraise basically. I jumped around the country working for kind of statewide congressional campaigns, for the 2010, 2012, 2014 cycle, culminating in kind of being the finance director for a US Senate race in the 2014 cycle. We were worked for a campaign that was running against Susan Collins, which we always like to say that we were kind of doing that before it was cool. And we were trying to tell everybody who Susan Collins was before kind of everybody knew during the Trump administration who she really was. After that was a couple pretty tough years for Democrats. A lot of people that we were kind of working with had lost campaigns, had left the industry. And I moved back here to Seattle to be with my now wife, and got connected. I was kind of contemplating leaving politics altogether, trying to find a quote real job, as my parents would say, and got connected through some folks to a kind of brand new firm that was started in Seattle called Blue Wave Political Partners. We were literally just like 4 people in an office doing compliance and fundraising for Seattle City Council races, basically. Only desks we had were like card tables. And from there, we kind of built an operation in the Seattle and Washington area where we work for a couple of our members of Congress here, our US Senator, and have kind of added partners from around the country where we have people in DC, we have people in California, and about 70 people who work for our firm in various capacities around the country right now, which is kind of amazing, going from like, a little under 10 years, kind of going that kind of transformation in that space and seeing it kind of develop and grow in that area. I'm still based in our Seattle office. I kind of oversee our fundraising operation for the state of Washington. I do some stuff around the country, but really focus mostly on our kind of local stuff here. And it's the kind of fun thing to me about this, and I'm sure we'll go into this more, is we're able to still kind of do stuff like all up and down the ballot. Where we still work for Seattle City Council races. We work for members of our legislature here in Washington, but we've been able to do kind of congressional statewide. And even one of the people who work at our firm did the Pacific Northwest region for Joe Biden's campaign in 2020. And so it's kind of getting that full breadth of political experience where, you turn on the national news and everybody's either talking about, the Senate Majority Leader or the president, and there's so much more to politics than that, up and down the level, and getting to see that kind of full gamut in this role has been really rewarding. So I will leave it there for now, and then we can go into it deeper, I'm sure.
Perfect. Alex?
Hi, everyone. Great to be here with you. I'm Alex. I'm currently the finance director and intern training coordinator at Evinco Strategies. So I pretty much handle all things traditional fundraising and finance strategy for our fundraising clients. We are a full service consulting firm. So we also have comms, digital, political, all the things you need to do on a campaign in-house. I got my start in politics by volunteering in college on, I think, the 2018 Tammy Baldwin election. I went to college in Wisconsin, so obviously lots of back and forth there, being a swing state. So I moved into my first official role in politics after graduating and becoming a field organizer for the Democratic Party of Wisconsin in 2020. And from there, I moved from field into finance because I really felt like there was a natural transition in the people aspect of both. I really loved the connection to people in field. However, it didn't feel super sustainable moving forward. I think a lot of folks get burned out of field pretty quickly. So finance seemed like a natural transition. Getting to build connections with donors and clients really felt like a great fit for me. So I started as a finance associate at Avinco Strategies, and after a couple cycles have moved my way up to finance director and running the department for fundraising at the firm. I also have a soft spot for our intern program. I love being able to support folks that are new to politics and working to build a bench of more progressive staffers, because I think we can all agree that there's a lack of progressive staffers, and especially because the burnout rate is so high, having folks who feel prepared to go into roles in political campaigns is really important. I think that is, my intro is a little bit shorter because I haven't been in politics as long as you all have, but really excited to be here and answer questions moving forward.
No worries. That was perfect. Thank you all for, that introduction, a little bit of that background. I want to say to the audience, if you have specific questions that you want to do to any panelists about their background, about their organization, please let them at the chat box and we'll pick them up. But I had a question that I'm really interested in when it comes to fundraising, and it's not a question, is some campaigns I've noticed that they don't value fundraising as they should. Some candidates think that by renting an RV or knocking as much doors as possible, they can, win an election in November. Could you, if you could have, a 5-minute pitch to from everyone here in the panel, why is it so important for campaigns and candidates to hire a fundraising firm? And we can start with Becca.
Sure, absolutely. The first thing I'd say to that is, it's the reality of politics. Everything costs money, period. We know that. If you want to effectively communicate with voters, there's a price tag with it. It's expensive. I don't think any of us, even those of us, whose careers are, raising dollars in the door, wish that there could be more money in politics. At the same time, at the end of the day, if you're, no matter how big of a room you're in, that's the extent you're going to reach. Where if you truly are able to raise some dollars and you're able to, get up on TV, digital ads, kind of, the mail, there's so many different ways to communicate with voters. And unfortunately, there's a price tag with all of that. And, I wish you could win by just walking around and, talking to the people you can get. But the reality is pretty much, districts are bigger than that and you can't talk to everyone. Anyone else want to jump in on that one?
I mean, if a person said that to me, what you just said, I'd say, well, one, RVs cost money. Two, knocking doors costs money because you have to buy lit and lists and, databases and everything else. But also every candidate, even ones that were very committed to knocking doors. And again, when you're working with candidates at the local or state legislative level, they have to knock a ton of doors. And the ones that even prioritize that, The second that voter communication happens at the mass level, whether it's TV, radio, digital, mail, or whatever, they immediately start seeing a difference at the doors. If we're spending enough on our side, all of those conversations become easier. You knock on the door, somebody opens it up and say, hey, I just got your mail piece. Let's talk about it. If we aren't doing enough on our side and the other side is sending out a bunch of mail or has TV ads up saying bad things about it, all of a sudden a lot more doors get slammed in your face. You see that when, especially on, in that doorbelling standpoint, in the last 3-4 weeks of an election, when everybody's making a decision and you're trying to talk to as many people at the doors as possible, that money, you can see the effect it has on those conversations at the doors. It's not that you have to choose between running a grassroots voter-centric campaign and a campaign that's focused on fundraising and big money. The reality is that you have to do both, and they work hand in hand, and you can't do one without doing the other.
Yeah, I would also just add in, you both mentioned like the interconnectedness of every aspect of a campaign, especially with call time, which I think most, if not all, candidates running for office hate call time or strongly dislike call time. Call time kind of gives you that like 2-for-1. You're reaching out not only to potential donors, but also voters. So if you're dedicating time to making the calls, you can do some of that voter contacts to some of those strong Dems while also raising money at the same time. So I think even though call time is not everyone's favorite, if you also reframe it a little bit as reaching out to voters, that is, I think, a little bit helpful for clients making calls. And again, it helps you pay for everything else that you have to do in a campaign.
And it makes sense, right? And how soon do you believe a fundraising firm, for those who are listening to this panel and are thinking about hiring a fundraising firm, how soon or at what point in the campaign do you believe it's the most effective to have a fundraising join the team? And that could be a very short answer as first day, but I would like to get an answer from all of you.
I'd say jump in and have the conversation with the firm you want to hire and talk to them about when they think it makes sense to start. But there's a lot of kind of habits and procedures and processes that it's a lot better to have that right the first time than to be kind of trying to fix later, especially in terms of like call time, best practices. There's a lot of firms that do kind of different programs to even get your campaign up and running. And then it may make sense to continue on, or it may make sense to take a breather for a little bit. A lot of different structures are out there, but have the conversation with the firm and someone that you trust immediately and seek their advice.
Yeah, I mean, I would say day one is kind of a priority too. I mean, I think, more and more we're seeing that initial push in a campaign is also very, very important in how people view it. What did you raise in your first quarter? What did you raise in your first month? A lot of these like big US Senate, US congressional campaigns, the day one number is now becoming this like big talking point. And there are certainly campaigns and candidates out there that can go out there and have a list prepared and have a friends and family network and have all that prepared where they can sit there and make all those calls themselves and do all that on their own. But the vast majority of campaigns are not there. They don't have the ability to kind of organize and have a ready-made list on day one. And then it's also just a question of like prioritization. Do you want a candidate focused on, tracking spreadsheets and cleaning stuff up and doing all this stuff? Or would you rather have their time spent more on the phone and have, people who are familiar with the systems and building all that stuff from day one? And, we tend to like to be on day one at launch. We've certainly joined many campaigns midstream, but as Becca said, it's a lot of cleaning up in that. It's a lot of fixing things. It's a lot of redoing systems and trying to make stuff kind of more efficient after the fact.
Yeah, I would also echo that as soon as possible, if you can get on at launch date, or even before launch date, if you know you're planning on running in 2026, and you want to start having conversations with a consultant a year before, because you're planning for your launch in a few months. I think that's helpful, so they can help you message around your launch, figure out how to have the best event kickoff, and launch your campaign right and raise as much as possible on day one. I also think that a lot of folks who sign fundraising firms later on have to, Chad, like you were just saying, backtrack and make some of those, have made mistakes that they should have done on day one. I think the biggest one is like calling your Rolodexing list. The amount of candidates who bring fundraising firms on mid-cycle and haven't called their friends and family for money. I mean, those are easy asks, so it's fine for them to do it mid-cycle, but they could have had so much more money in the door on day one if they had started calling those like low-hanging fruit donors way earlier on.
Perfect. Thank you. And I want to shift a little bit of the conversation to best practices. And if I could hear from all of you, and what do you believe are the best practices out there? And then we can talk about bad practices, because I believe we have a little bit of both in the area. Who wants to do first? Chad? Muted.
Yeah, I mean, I think the advantage of working at a firm where there's a little bit more stability, and we've kind of, there's this flow now where that you have elections, everything's kind of very busy from August, September, October into November, gearing up for an election every, at this point every year. At least here in our state, we have local elections in odd numbered years. We have state and federal in even numbered years. So there's kind of always an election going on. But we've tried to focus really on that after election time, when things are a little slower from a client perspective, on trying to build effective systems. And that can take the part of, having really good like event trackers or call time trackers or finance plans, and having all that stuff where we can have uniformity in that, but also trying to build like prospect lists that might make sense for like future clients, and all that stuff. I know that's a little less on like what's best practices for campaigns, but I think that's what we can focus on, as opposed to when I was working directly on campaigns, you'd lose your job every November, and you weren't necessarily thinking about like, okay, what am I going to do for the next 2 months to like make sure on the next campaign I have all the systems in place to be ready for it. You're just looking for a new job for that however long. And so that's kind of what we look at, really organized, really kind of like making sure we can get in a place where people can like pull their lists, think through their prospecting universes, think through like who are the groups and boards and everything that we should be reaching out to, and making sure all that stuff is in one place. We obviously love using databases, but we've done plenty of campaigns when you're on spreadsheets. And the biggest thing with fundraising, honestly, is making sure stuff doesn't fall through the cracks. If your candidate talks to somebody and they pledge to donate, you can't lose that person. You have to make sure all those people are in one place, organized, and you have a plan to follow up. And if they don't give, follow up again. And if they don't give, follow up again. And, that's kind of the most important thing from fundraising. It's not, all this stuff is important, but if you do everything you're doing right, and then you're not organized on the back end, it becomes impossible to actually make it work.
Thank you.
I would say something that builds off of that answer is the biggest thing that candidates need consistent coaching on is not being afraid to make the ask and then make the hard ask. And part of that goes into being organized and knowing who needs to have that ask made or made again. But I think the amount of candidates for office who get an endorsement and then don't make an ask for money after that and capitalize on that endorsement really is a missed opportunity. And then also just making sure that it's a hard ask and you're asking for a certain amount of money, allowing that person to say yes or no versus giving them an easy out, I think really is the most important thing, at least call time wise, that candidates consistently shy away from. And I get it's a hard thing to ask someone for $1,000 if you're not super comfortable with it. I don't think many people are super comfortable with that, but it really is the difference between like raising more money versus leaving money on the table.
Thank you, Alex.
I'll jump in with a couple of things to reiterate what everyone else has said. Early planning is really, really key. And a lot of that, and this is both in call time and also in email fundraising, it takes a while to build relationships that you darn already have. You're not just going to get it. Like, I think there's a lot of misconceptions that someone's going to hand you a magical list and they're going to pick up the phone and they're going to say, hello, my name is blank, I'm running for office. And everyone's going to, great, let me give you all of my money. And that, and then it's like, and then if that doesn't happen, the follow-up is, well, why did you give me a bad list? And it's like, this takes a lot of time. It's, and I think a part of that is you have to be authentic. Why are you running for office? Why are you the best person for the job? Something brought you to the point of, announcing this campaign and running, and, what is your magical, special sauce inside, and how are you explaining that to donors in the outside world, and really making sure they understand why you're the best person for the role, and why they need to join the movement now, and why early money matters. There's also a lot of why would this race is a year and a half from now, why would I give you money today? And it's, well, I'm not going to make it a year from now if you don't give me money today, because I'm going to be so far behind I won't exist. So I think a part of that is explaining the urgency, making it really clear. The last thing I would say is thank people. I think it's really easy to kind of, forget about the thank you notes and the messages, but, especially, when we're having, rough times in the economy at different points, make sure people are understanding how much you appreciate their dollars and the impact that they're having, and, be appreciative.
And talking about being grateful, obviously that's a positive thing, and that's something that, it should be done. And what would be bad practices then? What would be the opposite of having good practices in a fundraising firm?
Well, I'll jump in real fast and then let you guys go. I'd say bad practices again would be, picking up the phone and saying, hey, I'm running for office. You gonna give me $500? And kind of not explaining the why, not really connecting the dots of why the dollars in the door matter. And what a difference that money can make in your race and your campaign. But I'll pass this on to others.
Alex?
Yeah, I would say kind of the opposite of what, Chad, I think you were saying before, having bad lists on the consulting side. If we're not picking out good lists to give our clients, that's obviously bad practice. If we're giving Democrats a list that has a lot of Republicans on it and then they're upset at us, well, there's a reason, because we weren't targeting our lists correctly. So I would say that for sure on the consulting side of things. And then on the candidate side, I think that it is, again, some of the opposite of what Becca was saying. So if you're just making the ask and not providing reasons as to why this money matters, and also I do think that thanking donors is so important, especially although I'm not on the digital side of things, thanking grassroots low dollar donors in your email program is so important, because a lot of times those folks have less money to contribute than your folks that are contributing $2,000 to you every couple months. So that is so important, and I think helps you be a more authentic candidate. And without that, you're also building less genuine connections with your donors. I would also say, related to that, is taking bad call time notes. If someone tells you that their partner is going through a rough health situation right now and you call them back in a week and ask them for money, that's a huge red flag. You should not be calling that person for money right now. The same goes for if someone says to call them back in 2 weeks because they'll have $1,000 to contribute to you then, and you don't write that down and call them back in 2 weeks, you just lost out on $1,000. So bad call time notes, I would say, is a bad practice because that really could be leaving money on the table or cause you to make a big mistake and call someone when they clearly told you not to call them for a certain period of time.
And I would just kind of add on to that. Everything they said was absolutely right. And just adding on that, like, being responsive, following up, doing what you say you're going to do is so important in fundraising. If you're working with an event host who is hosting a fundraiser, be in communication with them at least on a weekly basis. Send them updates on RSVPs, give them more information, give them more ways to invite, remind them to like invite their networks. If you are, if somebody says they're going to pledge, make sure you're following up with that person. Make sure if they said, we want a link, or we want to see your campaign prospectus, or I'd love to look at your website, that stuff needs to get to them like very, very quickly. That applies to when you're working with the candidate. If you say like, we're going to get you this list by this day, make sure you're doing that. If you're supposed to draft materials, like that type of follow-up and that type of consistency on a campaign, campaigns are trying to do 1,000 different things. And, more often than not, especially with candidates who are relatively inexperienced, these are people who've had a lot of success in life more often than not, but don't really know what they're doing when it comes to running for political office. And so they're drinking out of a fire hose. And the last thing they want to worry about is having to micromanage a fundraiser and worry that stuff that we're doing is getting done or not. And so being that place of consistency and thoroughness and, commitment to making sure, things are getting done and things are happening is very valuable for a fundraiser. So all of that stuff, not responding to emails, not, following up with event hosts, that's like the worst thing kind of at the staff or consultant level that we could do. Or if somebody, endorses and says, you can, even on the digital, we'd love to do a list swap. Never emailing that person is like, it not only has stuff falls through the cracks and it costs you money, but it costs you trust with the client, and it costs you kind of the ability to kind of work in a good way with the campaign.
And talking about interconnecting digital, social media, emails, what would you say are the best practices when it comes to fundraising? Are we seeing a shift towards social media? Is email still the best way of fundraising? Can you explain a little bit on that aspect? And whoever can jump first, highly appreciate it.
Speaking more from the traditional fundraising perspective, I think what we're seeing a lot of, and I'm sure everybody's seeing it on their phones, is texts are becoming more and more. But I think what Becca said too, of having more well-written, well thought out, really good emails, quality emails is what is getting people to engage. And I think it's again, that integration of having, call time and events and email, and everybody's getting so many touches, especially if you've donated frequently to campaigns, that the more touches you can have on people that make it where they are learning something genuine about the candidate is important. And we see it over and over again where people get a direct mail piece, or people get a text, or people get an email, and then the candidate calls them and they say, oh, I've seen your stuff, I'm interested. It can work as a softening up front for a candidate in their call time. But on the flip side, we've seen it where a candidate calls somebody, they pledge, they don't do anything, and then you get to end of quarter and they receive an email and they donate off the email too. And so it's that kind of way that it all works together. There's no, as much as we do like define donations as this came from call time, this came from an event, they all have to work together and blend seamlessly to make an effective program.
So also speaking from the traditional fundraising side, not the digital side, I would say, and this is one of the advantages of the firm that I work at being a full service firm, is making sure your messaging is consistent across both digital and traditional. If you're talking about one thing on traditional and not mentioning at all on digital or on your website, that is an issue, because if a potential donor goes to your website and doesn't see what you talk to them about in call time, and it's like one of your main platform points, that's something's not connecting there. So making sure that messaging is consistent, but also that messaging can inform each other. So if something is doing really well on an email from digital fundraising, figuring out a way to integrate that into call time scripts, or if messaging on climate change is doing really well, maybe you plan an event in district that is focused on environmental groups in the area, and they're on the host committee for that event. So the messaging can inform each other on both. And then I would also just add making sure that the messaging is authentic and unique. A lot of the emails that campaigns send are similar around like holidays. So if everyone is sending out a Memorial Day email, you want to make sure that your messaging is somehow unique or authentic to your candidate, ideally both. But if you can shape your candidate's narrative based on their perspective for that email send, then you potentially are more likely to get through the noise of all of those Memorial Day emails that are coming into that potential donor's inbox.
I totally agree with everything you guys have both said. I think like anything in campaigns, it all works together. You talk about kind of the persuasion and the get out the vote window of the campaign, and there's direct mail, there's TV, there's people on the doors, there's digital ads, there's kind of all of the things working together. The same is true with fundraising. We're spot on, absolutely. Sometimes someone donates to an email because they got a call from the candidate, and sometimes vice versa. They're more likely to donate because they've been getting 10 really good emails and they're excited, and now the candidate's calls them. They all absolutely work together. And I think it's really important to think about it in that way. I think it's important to kind of think of the entire operation as one big team and not be kind of too focused on, well, this dollar amount came in from this ActBlue thread, and therefore, that's the entire story. That's certainly information you should be looking at and paying attention to, but it's never the full story, and things really do work together. I would also say there's a balancing act. We kind of joke that, we can't have nice things in democratic politics because when something works, we do it to death. And I think, we see that over and over again with kind of new technology, and things pop up and something works for a cycle and then everybody's doing it, kind of on steroids. And then it just starts becoming a lot of noise. So I think kind of being intentional, being authentic, exactly what Alex was saying, how are you breaking through? How are you being a little different? How are you making sure that, you're popping out? Is there a really interesting subject line if you're talking about email? Does the text message, if you're getting that text message, you want it to, you want the person receiving it to think that the candidate actually wrote it to them and it doesn't kind of sound like an AI script, just kind of, and again, spot on something else Alex said, pay attention to what is working in different areas and keep trying it. If something, even if it wasn't fundraising, is popping on social media that week, I would be iterating it in your email copy. I would be trying different messages on the phones. What's working on the phones? Let's try to incorporate that into our other avenues. And just, again, you know, politics is a team sport, and you've got to all be working together and talking together, and you know, you win or lose together. no one's going to jump up and down and say, well, I raised so much money on email, but my candidate lost and we were the only dollars coming in the door. Candidate lost. it didn't work. So
thank you for that. And you know, we've talked about good practices, bad practices. And for those who are watching and are thinking, hey, you know, I want to bring a consulting firm into my organization, into my campaign, how does the onboarding process work? How do you price your services? How much do you charge? Is there like a general market price that most firms expect? Or I want to give a little bit of insight to those who are really thinking about hiring a fundraising firm. And again, anyone can go first.
Yeah, I can. Okay, go ahead, Alex.
Are you sure? Okay, I can jump in. So at Evenco Strategies, our pricing is we do have a big focus on local politics and down ballot politics. So we try and make our services as affordable as possible for those folks. We do also our pricing. We have consistent pricing, but if, let's say, a PAC is a local community-led PAC and is just getting started, we'll work with them to make sure that the pricing is more affordable for them. Maybe we'll delay invoicing for them for 3 months so that they have time to raise money and that they're not like bleeding dry paying for our consulting services. So really, one of the big things I would say about our pricing is that we try and be as adaptable to the client as possible. Obviously, within reason, we can't offer them services for like $100 a month, unfortunately. But we try our best to work with folks, especially down ballot candidates who can't afford these big consultants based out of DC. I would also say, as far as the onboarding process works, for us, it really does depend on how many, I would say, departments, since we're a full service consulting firm, you're bringing on. So for example, right now, we have some clients that have an outside general consultant, and then we're just on as fundraising consultants. So the onboarding there looks slightly different because they already did all of the messaging and general onboarding with an outside general consultant. If we're coming on to a client where we are the full consulting team, where we're the general consultant, the digital, the finance, then it is a lot, then the onboarding is a lot more streamlined because we're doing it all in-house. And we normally do one onboarding meeting. Beforehand, we send a really robust onboarding questionnaire. I think it's probably like over a dozen pages, asking all of the questions you need to know, compliance-related questions, messaging questions, just getting to know the candidate type questions. Then we go over all of that in an onboarding meeting, and then we kind of just hit the ground running, working on materials and getting things up and running.
It's kind of funny that to ask this question, because right after this, I actually have a call with a candidate who is thinking about running for state senate in Washington in an open district. So we've been talking about this internally as well. I mean, the onboarding question, it depends a little bit whether you're starting from the very beginning of a campaign or whether you're joining midstream. Obviously, from the very beginning, especially for a first-time candidate or a candidate who's running for higher office for the first time, you're really focusing on building their personal Rolodex, pulling all their contact lists, you know, trying to do kind of all the work to get stuff ready. You know, state and local, you're also trying to think of like, who can we get email lists from? Who can we build, you know, an email list? Are we using a database? Are we getting everything in the database? And then again, we talked about kind of building those internal systems of putting together, you know, an event tracker, a call time tracker, a finance plan, putting together all the systems that we're going to be using throughout the campaign. If it's midstream, it's like a little bit different from the aspect that some of that stuff has already been built, but we tend to like to kind of come in, build our own systems, try to look at what's happened, and then try to look where we can improve. From a pricing standpoint, I think that really depends on budget too. Again, doing everything kind of from city council to president. If we had some like base hourly charge, there's no way that could actually work for all of our clients. We tend to do kind of a monthly retainer model where it's just kind of a set even charge across a campaign, and there's no kind of like percentage or hourly requirement. We found that works better for budgeting for campaigns. And I don't think we don't want to put ourselves in a situation where we're pushing for stuff unnecessarily to like bump up our like percentage or hourly thing, where it's just kind of like a one set month. But it does very, very much depend on whether it's kind of a targeted congressional versus a safe seat, legislator versus like an open seat city council. Like everything kind of has a little variation to it.
Thank you, Chad. And before I go to Becca, I would like to ask the audience, if you have any question, this is the time to write it in the chat. And after Becca, we'll go to those questions asked from the audience. Becca.
Yes, absolutely. So in terms of onboarding, I think pretty similar to everyone else, we kind of have an internal checklist of, okay, we've got a signed contract, we're a go, here are the 5 things we need, checklist, let's go. And, we can spin things up very, very quickly, given that. In terms of pricing, we do all-inclusive flat rate dollar amount per month. I agree with Chad on that. We've tried a bunch of different models at different times, and that just seems to be the thing that ends up being seamless. We do occasionally offer kind of discounts if you're getting in really, really early. Sometimes, we started talking to, 2024 candidates, I want to say at the end of 2021. So for some of those races, it's like, okay, well, let's we'll give you a discount for, X number of months to kind of build the machine up. As you're getting closer to election day, that's a lot less feasible for us, just given the machine is running at that point and it's go time. So that's kind of the big thing. Taking a big step back and, not talking about us, but just talking about kind of big picture, what you should be looking at is I would make sure you fully understand exactly what you're getting for what you're paying, and be really, really clear, because I think it's easy for there to be misunderstandings, especially with, firms that offer a ton of services. And then they might offer you a proposal and it's like, that dollar amount, you may not be getting every single service that they mentioned in the initial pitch, because that may not make sense for your race right now. So really kind of nailing down and being very clear on exactly what you are getting for what price point, what that looks like. If there would be kind of extra charges that would pop up later, what would those look like and why, and kind of really flush that out in the beginning, just because I think it's really easy for there to be misconceptions on that, and that's something that nobody wants to deal with. So I think making sure everyone has a very clear understanding on what they are paying and what they are getting matters, and really nailing that down early.
Thank you. So we have one question from the audience. Ryan O'Donnell says, do you partner with other firms, and how?
Well, I'm still unmuted, so I'll keep talking and then I'll pass it on. All the time. I would say that, I get the vast majority of my clients either as referrals from fundraising shops or digital shops. I work with a ton of different consulting firms and entities out there. And, sometimes we're bundled together in one big pitch. Sometimes we're separate, sometimes we're brought on later, but we work closely with many, many, many firms, and always love to work with more. So if anyone wants to work with us, give me a call.
Yeah, I mean, same for us. We work with other, on larger races, work with other kind of mail media, digital compliance, polling firms on those races. On smaller races, it's generally just a fundraising firm and a general consulting firm that works together. We also work some amount with other fundraising firms, specifically kind of when we have two separate clients who are doing like a joint event together, and we kind of have to come together and split up duties. But that's kind of probably the area where we have the least amount of experience with other fundraising firms, but that does happen as well. But definitely a lot of other kind of, different firms that kind of specialize in other parts of campaigns.
I would also say yes and echo everything y'all said. The only thing I would also add is that sometimes it's not just firms on your candidate's account, but it's also firms for other candidates. So if you're trying to figure out a list swap, a lot of the times you're not talking to the candidate, you're talking to another digital firm. Or if you're doing a joint fundraising event, you're a lot of times working with another fundraising firm, not the candidate and the candidate staff. So most of the time too, when there's like collaboration across candidates, especially if they're, I'd say like state level and above, you're not really talking to the candidate themselves. You're most of the time talking to another consulting firm.
And just to echo what Becca said too, it's a tremendous, having those relationships are a tremendous place of referral. I know there was, in some of the materials we were talking about marketing. We do very little marketing, like in any sort of traditional sense, because it's really important to have those relationships with other consultants who see the work you do and see the good work you do and are referring you or recommending you to other campaigns. And so working with other firms is kind of like a very, important piece of the business, honestly.
Thank you for that. I was informed that we have one last question. It comes from Lindsay Rido, I believe. How do you handle capacity concerns? Fundraisings can be sometimes consuming for a firm. I'm curious if you require campaigns have on-the-ground staff to support, or if everything is internal to your firm. Who wants to take on that one?
I can do that. I mean, for our firm specifically, we typically have 2 staffers for traditional fundraising assigned to every campaign. Generally a more senior person who kind of thinks strategically and big picture and systems, and a junior person who kind of works on, the logistics of events, call time, list building, everything like that. For smaller campaigns, we typically do full service fundraising for everything and kind of do everything in-house. Once you move more towards like a statewide or congressional level, we typically recommend that a candidate, if somebody's doing 30 hours of call time a week at a congressional level, we typically recommend that the campaign hire a full-time call time manager to help kind of do that. But it's typically somebody that we help hire, train, manage. We're still very involved in the day-to-day on that, but sometimes we will recommend hiring on-staff fundraising as well.
Perfect. And we've talked a lot about candidates, but do you also work with nonprofits and other organizations? And how does that look like?
I can go first. So our firm, we have worked with not just candidates, but also other electoral projects like ballot measures. And some of those ballot measures have been sponsored by nonprofits. So in like a roundabout way, we're working with a nonprofit, but they're really working on an electoral effort. Also, we work with PACs, candidates running for office, and we have done some organizational fundraising, but that definitely is, nonprofits are very different with like grant writing fundraising, and that's not something that we typically do in-house because you need such a different skill set to do grant writing than electoral fundraising.
Yeah, we mostly do. We've done plenty of initiatives here at the local level, and it is a very different fundraising. Usually you don't have as many limits. And so it's, where a campaign at the local level, you might have $1,000 limits. For the federal level, the limits are $3,300. A lot of times for IEs and ballot initiatives, you have kind of no limits. And so it's much more of like a narrower targeting, but at the same time, you don't have somebody to do call time for you either. So you have to do kind of more of the outreach yourself, or work with a finance committee, or do some other stuff where you're doing kind of more limited outreach and with much larger checks. We also do we're doing the Future Forward, the Biden IE nationally right now as well. So that's kind of just a lot of, one of our partners travels around the country and kind of does that a lot right now. We do a very limited amount of kind of like for nonprofits. One of the actually cool things we've done here in our office in Seattle is there's a local kind of homelessness provider who focuses on getting supportive housing for homeless mothers with children. And we help them at the end of the year, which is kind of our downtime in December, kind of make calls. So all of our staff who just kind of rolled off campaigns, we spend a bunch of time on the phones making calls and asking people to donate to their year-end goals. So it's not a client that we work through all year. It's not actually one that we do like a lot of strategic stuff with, but we do kind of these year-end calls for them every year and help them kind of bring in their kind of like pre-New Year's kind of goals. And that's been something that's very rewarding kind of for our staff and helping make a difference and in kind of a local kind of group and that we've been able to partner with. And, it's not something that we do all the time, but it's something like when we can find those opportunities is kind of nice.
Thank you for that.
That's amazing. I love that you do that.
Becca, you want to add something, or can we wrap this up?
We can wrap it up. I mean, we work with a little bit of everyone, but I'm kind of different because I'm email and email only. So that probably question was less relevant to me, but thank you all. This has been great.
Perfect. Thank you. It's been amazing. Honestly, hopefully everyone has learned more about fundraising. Those who are thinking about hiring a fundraising firm have decided. I know I've learned a lot. And hopefully we can continue to enjoy more of these conversations in the future. Thank you very much for everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.